Welcome, everyone, to the Powerhouse 2014 Summit. Today is Wednesday, and we are going to be speaking to a real dear friend and someone who I've sought. We all have times when we need a little guidance, and sometimes our heads feel cloudy, and we want to have a different perspective or have a perspective that is in alignment with our soul and our higher self. And my dear, dear friend, Reverend Elvia Roe is here with us. Hi, Elvia.
Hello, Asha. Hello, everyone. Thank you for
Hi.
having me here.
Absolutely. I part of why I wanted to bring you is that I've seen how you have really taken what your purpose is in connecting people with their angels, and not just doing it in a one-on-one, but you've really taken this purpose and mission in your life and created community around it. I heard somebody say, they were talking about people who work with angels, and the people that have gone through your programs, that they are really at another level of service. And I mean, I just heard that less than 2 weeks ago, and I think it speaks volume to your commitment. And that's why I wanted you to be here, and wanted to make sure that everybody who is signed up for the summit that got that perspective, that angel perspective, that can be so sweet. And sometimes I don't know, I think people just have a soft spot in their heart for angels, no matter what their belief systems are. Wouldn't you say that?
Absolutely. I think it really spans all races, genders, religious types. To connect with the angels is just, it's magical, especially when you understand what it really means. And thank you for that compliment. That means a lot, hearing that people are experiencing that through the training. So that's awesome. Thank you.
And you've been doing it for a number of years now. How many years have you been doing trainings and teaching people how to become, have that higher level of integrity with the service? Because it's a huge service. When people are coming to you in deep suffering or in deep, desperation, wanting to know what a message is or wanting to know what to do, it's a huge responsibility, I think.
It is a huge responsibility, and Angels Teach turns 7 on April 1st.
Wow.
No joke. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. I was doing angel readings before that, but I would say the real work started when Angels Teach was born, which is always special. I always celebrate it every year. So
yeah. So the topic today is getting to know who you are. And for those who have been on a conscious path, I feel like really coming into our authenticity means truly grounding it in our bodies. And I wanted to kind of get your take on what the angels have to say about all of that, authenticity and also community.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think I'm really passionate about the angel work for a lot of reasons. One is I think that what I teach and what Angels Teach is all about is different from a lot of angel communication teachers in that I have a strong, strong passion to help people to ground their work. Just as you're saying, I think there's a lot of, and it's all good. I'm not judging anybody. It's really all a process of evolution here, and each community, each teacher has their purpose. It's very important. And my purpose is to help people to kind of come down from hanging out up here with the angels and ground it and start to do their work and start to connect with their true selves. And I think that touches on your point about authenticity, is that, when you start deepening your communication with the angels, that translates directly into living your truth, not the truth that somebody else taught you to be, not the truth that you think you're supposed to be, but the truth that lies within, that you were born with, that you were encoded with. And so many people myself included, back before I started this journey, I was out of touch with that. Our society is really oppressive in a lot of ways, and not in a meaning intentional way. It just is, because of the pace, because of life, because of stress, etc. And so when we work with the angels, they help us to put into focus exactly what is important for us to remember who we are, and to trust that, and to love that for all of its peaks and valleys and warts and blemishes and beautiful things that we are. We really step into what it means to be me and you and whoever that is.
And so how have you watched yourself transform because of this work that you're doing intimately with the angels? I mean, like, what's been the transition or the process? And, yeah, what can you say about that?
Well, it's interesting. It's a good question. I know myself in a way that I never even dreamed that I could. And I had a teacher early on in my transformation that started, short version, in my 40s, late 30s, early 40s, because I wasn't consciously connected, so to speak, until that point. And one of my first teachers said to me, you're going to look back at yourself several years out now and not even recognize yourself. You're just, I was a corporate VP, and yes, I always just strove to come from a place of love, but it wasn't my life mission, and it wasn't something that was in my consciousness all of the time, and so it's just a very different way of living, and it's a way of realizing. It's funny because my top tier program, I just this year, the class that's in session right now from Angelic Life Coach, I changed it to a ministry program midstream, and realizing that ministry fits it much better than coaching ever did. The content of the course is essentially the same, but the title of it is different. And Peter was sharing, my husband Peter was sharing with me that I guess a friend asked, what's the difference between coaching and ministering? And he was just telling me this morning, actually, and he said, well, essentially it's the same thing, except that when you're ministering, you are embodying the belief that there's a higher power that's helping you with the work that you're doing. And so it just supersedes everything that you touch and that you do, is that belief in a higher power and knowing that you're never alone, even when there's no other physical bodies in the room.
And do you feel, what's your sense? Do you feel like people are really hungry to reach or to access that higher level, or do you feel that as a collective we're still kind of, I don't know, so grounded to the point that we're underground about this, this sweet connection?
I think most people are really hungry. The question is, do they understand what they're hungry for?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people just know that something is missing, but they're not sure what that is, at least in my experience. And it's a journey, because when you go from living underground, I love that term, when you go from living underground and you start to stick your head up and you look around and you realize that you're not living a life that's true and authentic to yourself, that can be really, really hard. That can be like hitting a wall for some people, because there's such a difference.
So what would you say for people who are in that moment? I know I had one person say to me, I wish I could listen to these live, but I'm working a 9 to 5, and there's something about the way she said in her email. It didn't seem like she was that happy about it, and I'm wondering if you can speak to that person who's in that in-between place from that angel's perspective.
You have to start, and you have to make the decision that you want change. And it all comes from that place of making a decision. In fact, I've, over the last year, been doing a lot of dialogue with my angel friends about what it means to pray. And I've really come to that place, because pray is a 4-letter word to some people. It's really fascinating to me how it can set some people off is,
I'll pray for you, and no thanks.
Yeah, well, no, I think that people have an some people have an association with it that, goes back to church roots, and they may not want to go there. Um, and anyway, so I just have been welcoming it more and more into my life, and of course always been doing prayer, but realized in my dialogue with the angels that so much of it is just about making a decision, and you look at what we say at the end of a prayer, blessed be, and so it is, amen, which means it's done. These things that we say, it's like we forget that the whole point of a prayer is that you're making a decision that this is what you want to bring into your life, that this is who you want to be.
Mm. So it's in that it's really an affirming statement, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I actually would take it a step further and say it's even more than an affirmation. It's a declaration.
Mm-hmm.
It's a decision. It's like, you know what, I'm done with that. I'm doing this. So what I would say to this woman and to anybody else is start by making the decision. Start with a prayer, if that works for you, and say, I welcome change.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we are all predestined to live a certain life. And, this woman is destined to live a 9-to-5 job. And I will say it's really interesting. When people start to reconnect with their authentic selves by working with the angels, a lot of times they will realize a few things will happen. But a lot of times they'll realize that in that 9-to-5 job, that it's actually the right place for them, but they need to make a mental shift with how they approach it, what they view as their priorities there. Maybe it's the other people that they're connecting with. Maybe they're actually kind of doing coaching for their coworkers, and that's their true reason for being there. Other people, realize that it's absolutely not the right place, and they do decide to leave. But, it's all about reconnecting and making that decision that I'm going to be who I came here to be. And I keep smiling and my earbud's falling out, so better stop smiling, huh?
No, keep smiling. Come on.
I'll just hold my super glue here.
And so what do the angels, what is their message in terms, what is their message about authenticity in today, in 2014?
I'm listening, so hang on a second. Just because the way you said that made me feel like they're looking for that to be a channel. That you need to do it, that there's no more delaying. I have this, I know there's an article in me somewhere that's going to be coming out at some point. Let's talk about the weather. That's the name of the subject line. Because the weather's been crazy. Look at the cold, look at the floods in the UK, the heat down in Australia, and at least for me, and maybe this is just the way the angels are getting a message to me, so others may not be picking up on it, but I feel like there's a sense of urgency for us to step into this place of authenticity. And I don't want to say that with fear, because angels and fear they don't coexist. The angels are always about love. At the same time, I do feel from them and hearing yeses that there's a need for immediate change. And we're at a crossroads. I am seeing a little X in my third eye here, and we're at a crossroads, and it's time for us to start to step into our true selves, or I think the alternative is something none of us want, and that's really, something that, as I say, it's kind of feeling like a pit in my stomach. So I don't really want to go down that path because, and actually that brings up a good point in terms of authenticity and community, because I think any one of us can, especially us light workers who are really sensitive, really sensory beings, we can look at the news, we can read the newspaper, we can look around the world and say, oh my God, and just get paralyzed like deer in the headlights. And you have to, like that Pink song, you got to just try. You just have to, in your head, there's only one option, there aren't two. There's only one, and that's the higher path.
And so when you say that, there's this sense of urgency, pit in your stomach. It's sort of like you're seeing that there's two choices, that there's a choice to go in this direction that that clearly your body's reacting in a way that doesn't feel good, and there's this other choice to move into authenticity. And can you expand on what that choice feels like and what it looks like for all of us, our society, our humanity, to be living in this space of truly grounding who we are, and not being in the fear place, but being in the love space that your sweet angels are always advocating?
Well, I think, that pit in my stomach is part of the clairsentient sense. One of the mechanical ways that we communicate with the angels. And it's one of those ways that we recognize that, no, that's not something that we want. That's not something that we are intending to create here. And so I think what we're looking for is to be living from that heart space that you're talking about that always feels yummy. And we forget how enormously powerful each and every one of us is. I know I forget it. I think all of us forget it. Yeah. That we individually, when we're connected, have so much power. And as we step into that place of living from the heart, that place of authenticity, we join together and we collectively can do huge change on the planet. Huge shifts. And you studied with Jimmy Twyman, so you're a minister of spiritual peacemaking as well, and you probably know some of Jimmy's things that he's done in terms of prayer and some of the things that he's accomplished through working with the collective mind and what it's done to create change in the world. And I think that's the kind of choice that I'm talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so really, having people feel good. I don't know how else to, that seems to be the summary, is like if we could all feel really good, that seems like a really good direction to go in.
And I think it's good that the good is the soul level kind of good. And I know you mean that. I'm just clarifying for.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, we've talked about this week about accepting the wholeness of who we are. So I think I pretty much covered that.
Yeah.
And so, what's your sense of what the angels wish for us?
To be happy. I was in a homeopathy training years ago, and the teacher there, very cerebral, very in his head, and very accomplished too, put on the board, let's define success. And he had a whole class, this was a big class exercise, let's define success. And I raised my hand and I just said, to be happy? And I felt like I was done, And the whole class, I swear to God, they spent like 20 or 30 minutes just, with all these adjectives, all these things that had to be the definition of success. And it really stood out in my mind because I really think all that our angels and the divine want for us is to experience joy, to be happy, and yes, we have our periods that are difficult, and a lot of people, especially if you're coming from Angels Teach land, know that my last year has been difficult. And I really, in a very authentic way, believe that it's all good. And when you can be in that space of when stuff happens, focusing on the good that comes out of it, the family that comes together in times of crisis, the conversations that happen that wouldn't have otherwise, all of the good that comes out of difficult times, rather than the difficulties themselves, you expand that sense of happiness and joy. And, I can say, and I know it sounds like it doesn't make sense, that you know, I have in the last year cried and been happy at the same time. You
Mm.
know, cried tears of grief and been happy at the same time. You know, and I think, so I guess, yeah.
So there's this obviously there's this part of you that's really grounded in your path as a human being, and really accepting, like at a really radical acceptance of whatever life brings you, so that you can connect further and more intimately, and to really open up to the gifts that come because of the stuff that comes up. Is that?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and because of you know, just events of the last year, probably one of the biggest gifts for me personally is that I have come to a place where there's no other choice other than to surrender moment to moment, because there are so many demands on um, my time, my energy, that I